So thank you for tuning in to this video on consent for Mystery Temple. Mystery Temple is about revealing the radical expression of your authentic self. And the way that we do that at Mystery Temple is through our sexual expression, sexual exploration. We use it as a lab to discover more of ourselves. Now, what stops us from being fully expressed, whether it's sexually or otherwise in our life? I find that the reason that we're not fully expressed is because we don't feel safe. And the reason that we need to have this consent talk in order to create safety in the first place is that so many of us have had unsafe experiences in the past. We haven't felt safe. Our trust has been violated. And so then we repressed ourselves. That is the cause for repression. And so if we want to be more expressed, we need to feel more safe. And it's not necessarily that these times in the past were because of malicious intent. I think that we all sometimes make mistakes around consent. And so the purpose of today is to get us all on the same page to create that safe container so that we can all be more expressed at Mystery Temple. It's normal that when you see someone and when you're attracted to them, that you start having some fear around that. And the fear a lot of times is around asking for what you want. So instead of asking for what we want, we test. We sort of see, is it okay? Does this feel all right? Can I touch you over here? Can I touch you on the shoulder, lower arm? We started testing around it. Oh, maybe, do they want to kiss? Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll give it a try. And so instead of asking for what we want, we just test. And the metaphor that I always give for that is that testing, especially when it comes around touching and especially sexual touch, is sort of like if I brought you to the top of a skyscraper and I told you, use all the space. Dance on top of the entire roof of the skyscraper. Oh, but there's also no walls or borders around the edges, and here's the catch, you're going to be blindfolded. Nobody's going to dance. Nobody's going to move. Maybe you'll dance in your spot sort of wiggling back and forth because you don't know where the edge is. And even if you sort of want to move around, you sort of like you're blindfolded and you move bit by bit by bit and you try and find the edge. The problem is, when do you find the edge? When you fall over the edge. And what consent does is it creates these boundaries around the roof and helps us take off the blindfold so that we can use all the space to be expressed. That safety creates a space for us to have more expression. When we don't know what's okay, we're always going to be worried that we're not okay, that what we're doing is not okay, or that we're going to hurt other people. So how do we create more of this safety? Consent allows us to explore all the way to the edges by first defining those edges, being very clear about what they're all about. So communicating clear desires and clear boundaries lets you express and explore. It lets you get out of your head. It lets you become more present. It lets you be more relaxed. And so the interaction that you'll have with the other person becomes that much more juicy. So the first step that we must be in integrity in ourselves over is owning our desire. What do you want out of this interaction? Because what you want matters, your desires matter. So it's important to just take a moment and be present with what you want. Be present with your fear of rejection, of not getting what you want. Be present with the awkwardness of the situation, because sometimes it is awkward. And one sort of like key trick that you can use to help get out of your head a little bit or out of the fear of the rejection is to separate your statement of desire from the request. So instead of saying, "Can I kiss you?" you would break it up to, "Wow, I would really love to kiss those juicy lips. How does that sound to you?" So you're breaking down what you want and what the request is from another person into two parts. So that way, even if a person says, "You know what, that's not for me," it doesn't invalidate your desire. Your desire matters, your desire counts. That person just might not want to do it with you, and that's okay. And so another key to stating our desires is being unattached. I think that's really just the key to life, is not having attachments or expectations. And always think in your mind, if not this, there's something better in store for me. Don't worry about it. So being okay with the rejection. The rejection is not a rejection of you, it's just a rejection of that one thing. Step 2 is owning your boundaries. Knowing your boundaries is even more important than knowing your desires. Not only is what you want matter, what you don't want also matters. So if people are asking you for things and you don't want to do it, but you say yes, then your yes really loses its value. Then when you really have a real yes, it doesn't mean very much because you're just saying yes to everything. So it's important that we own our boundaries, that we're okay with not being a people pleaser, with not just going along with the flow and what everybody else wants. Honoring your boundaries is an act of radical self-love, and it's also a love language. There's a famous saying that says, walls keep people out, boundaries show them where the door is. So what a boundary is about is this is a portal of permission, of this is how I'm okay with you interacting with me. So we know our desires and we know our boundaries. And we've all been guilty in the past of not asking for what we want. And we've all been guilty in the past of not being clear about what we don't want. So I want you to remember that when you step into Mystery Temple or anywhere out there in the world and you want to connect with someone, that just as hard as it's been for you to state your desires and your boundaries, it's just as hard for them. So just because the person doesn't say no to something doesn't mean it's a yes. And just because they say a yes, it doesn't mean it's a conscious yes. We really want to make sure that the person is in alignment and in agreement from their full body for every decision they make, and that we are as well. And so there's two frameworks I'll talk about today. And the first framework, a very basic one, is called fears, desires, and boundaries. And this is how it works. You check in with yourself. You look the other person in the eye. You just become present with them in the moment. Take a breath and check in. What are the fears that are showing up in me? What are the desires for what I have in interacting with this other person? What boundaries do I have in this particular interaction? And I like checking with four major parts. First, the head. What does the head say? What does the head want? The head's really good at making sure that we're safe. Second, the heart. What does the heart want? What are my feelings around this interaction? And how does that change my desires and boundaries and fears? And then the body. Am I tight? Am I loose? What's happening somatically in my body? Sometimes the body knows better than the mind knows how safe we feel with someone. And finally, with our genitals. Are we aroused or not? So check in with those parts, your head, your heart, your body, your genitals, and then encourage the other person to do the same. And have them share their fears, their desires, and their boundaries. And you'll notice when both people share their fears, it already makes the fear subside somewhat. And when you share your boundaries and your partner says, I can honor and respect your boundaries, and they share their boundaries and you say, I can honor and respect your boundaries, and you both share your desires and you see where there's an overlap available between both of your desires and both of your boundaries, that's when you create that fence around, and that's when you're going to have a very juicy experience because there's going to be no missteps, or it minimizes the chances of having missteps, and it maximizes the chance of a good time. So every time after you state your request from another person, the other person can respond in one of four ways. They can respond, yes, I want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. Not now. Maybe later, the timing's not right, or something different. Maybe there's another option. Let's try something else. So yes, no, not now, or maybe something different. Now, even though no is a full response on its own, what I love to encourage at Mystery Temple and just in general is that when someone makes a request of you, knowing how hard it is to make a request, that besides the yes or the no or whatever else you're going to tag onto it, you also say, thank you so much for asking for what you want. That's really brave. Now, let's say you make a request and the other person says no, they're not interested. Check your ego aside. We already said it's not a rejection of you. They just don't want to do that thing with you. And remember how hard it is to say no. And maybe you can thank them and say, thank you so much for taking care of yourself. Thank you for honoring your boundaries. I know that's really tough. And then offer them space. Don't keep making more requests. As if it's a no, they probably need a little bit of space. So that's the basic framework: fears, desires, and boundaries. But if you're planning on getting particularly sexy with someone, there's probably a few more things that you're going to want to know about those people before you connect with them. Are they in a relationship? What's their sexual health like? What do they want and don't want to do? What expectations do they have of you after that interaction? And so we have a framework called RBDSM. It doesn't necessarily have to do with BDSM, it's just a way to remember it. It's called RBDSM. And that's an anagram that stands for relationship status and agreements, boundaries, desires, sexual health, meaning, and aftercare. I'll break it down. So first is the R, that's relationships, status, and agreements. So this person that you're going to interact with, and also for you, you share: are you monogamous? Are you in a relationship? Are you single? Are you polyamorous? Are you in an open relationship? Are you celibate? What are your relationship agreements if you are in a relationship? What is okay for you to do within the confines of that relationship? So share those things so you're both on the same page and you don't end up making each other or the third party, or the partner of one of those people, feel bad about an interaction where you didn't check in. So that's the R. B, we spoke about already, that's the boundaries. It's what you don't want. And D, we spoke about, that's desires. It's what you do want to experience. We told you, really feel into those. Then there's S, which is sexual health. And sexual health includes also your STDs. So if you have when was the last time you took an STD test? What were the results of that STD test? How many people have you been intimate with since that STD test? You want to talk about your sex life. You don't have to go into too many details, but just in terms of safety. You also want to talk about contraception, what type of contraception you'll want to be using. That's all under the S. And finally, there's the M, which is my favorite. It's meaning and aftercare. What does this interaction mean to you? If one person thinks it's a one-night stand and another person thinks it's an opening to a relationship, they're both not going to be happy the next day when they're not on the same page. So what does this mean to you? Is this just an experiment? Is this a soul connection? What is this all about? And in that includes also the aftercare. How do you want to be taken care of after? Is it cuddles? Is it a little debrief and a talk? Is it check in on me the next day? What is the aftercare that you want? And then after you share those 5 categories, relationship status and agreements, boundaries, desires, sexual health, meaning, and aftercare, both people share that. Now you get to decide if you want to proceed. Their sexual health, is that satisfactory to you? What if one person wants to use contraception, the other person doesn't? You want to check in on that. What if, their relationship status isn't something that you're okay with? What if the person's aftercare is too much work for you to do later? You want to check on all those things. If there is enough overlap that it feels like a fuck yes, then you move on and you proceed. And if not, maybe there's an adjustment, or maybe it's a no. So I want to be very clear here as we're wrapping up. Consent is not about permission. It's not one person asking, another person saying yes or no. Consent is about arriving towards an agreement together. Both people must share their desires and their boundaries and all the other information and then agree together. And you want to check in along the way with every escalation as well to ensure that that agreement is still there. Maybe it was okay at the beginning, maybe it doesn't feel good later. And by the way, who's responsible to stop the action if it doesn't feel right? The first person that notices. So check in with yourself regularly. Does it feel good? These frameworks are designed to get you out of your head to make things feel good, but things can always, go off. So check in and always be in communication throughout. If you have any questions around these consent frameworks or any other frameworks out there, please reach out to me, and I can't wait to see you at the next Mystery Temple.